Welcome back for episode 2 of our Train Up a Parent podcast. We're excited. I'm Charles Draper, and this is Mark Lail. So we're here with round 2. I hope you enjoyed the past couple. Today we're going to talk about faith. What is faith, and why is it important? And we're just going to unpack all the things about faith, as far as we know it, right? At least. So Mark, I'll let you kick it off. Kind of what's the thought process, faith, why is it important, and what as parents we need to know, and some key takeaways.
Well, if you're a Christian and you've been in church any amount of time, you've probably heard or read in Sunday school, heard the pastor preach numerous times on Hebrews 11:1, which is Paul's definition of faith, right? Which is faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things that are not seen. So hope at work, it's an interesting word at work, hope. My employees...
Do they like the word hope at work?
No, they do. They do. My employees like the word hope at work, and I don't like the word hope at work. So I'm a vice president of an information technology team for a global manufacturer. And we'll be in a meeting and we'll have a challenge. Or maybe it's an opportunity. It's not always issues. It's an opportunity. And there's an opportunity to reap some rewards or return for the company. There's a way that we can reach our strategic goals and objectives. And somebody will say, well, I hope that, it fills in the blank.
Makes me cringe too, just as leading. We don't hope.
No, they immediately, when I hear it, I say, hope's not a strategy.
Yep.
Hope's not a strategy, right? And hope's not a strategy at the workplace because that just means somebody's not doing anything. Yeah. And that's what I hear. I know you're a leader. I mean, do you hear the same thing?
Yeah, I hear hope and I hear copout. Like, I hope somebody else is going to do it. It's what I hear, really, right, whenever I hear the word hope.
Right. I hope Mark lets me off the hook.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I hope that happens, but we're not going to do anything, and we hope they figure it out. Who they is unbeknownst to us sometimes, right? So, yeah.
So I've been using this phrase now for the last 2 months, and I've said it, I don't even know how many times. I mean, a dozen, maybe more. And one of the other VPs, we were at our national sales and marketing meeting earlier this year, he used the phrase as well. He made a statement and he said, we hope, he was talking about tariffs and the administration and everything that we had to jump through all sorts of hurdles in 2025, the reasons. And he was saying, I hope 2026 is not going to be the same. And he called himself and he goes, hope's not a strategy. And my phone blew up. I mean, one guy's sending me a text. He says, did you pay him to say that? Right? Because,
great?
I mean, hope's not a strategy.
Yeah.
But there is a hope that is a strategy.
Yeah.
And as we shift gears, talk about our spiritual life, what does that word hope really mean? And when I hear the word hope at work, it sounds like you think the same way that I do.
Yeah.
Hope is not a strategy. Hope is just a cop-out, potentially. But the hope that's in the Bible is a different definition.
Yeah.
We've got a whole book that's about God and his character. This is his story, right? And everything in this, from the first Genesis 1:1 all the way to Revelations, when it says amen at the very end, so be it, right? This is the truth. And God has never failed. He has always came through with what he promised. He's always upheld every covenant, every contract that he's went into, he's always upheld it. Yeah. Even when he could have got out of it, he still upheld it, right? I mean, look at the ancient Israelites. Every 40 years, on fire, doing whatever they want to, not on fire, disobedient, on fire, disobedient. But yet he still came through with his covenant that he made with Abraham, which is that he would step into the world through his lineage and live a perfect life and be that suffering servant of Isaiah. So the hope that's in the Bible that we just read about is completely different than what a lot of people think the definition of hope is. It's really a knowledge. It's a certainty. So faith is the hope, right? The knowledge, change that word hope to knowledge, the knowledge that we are eternally secured if we make Jesus the Lord of our life and we believe in our heart that he is who he says he is, he says he's God, and that he is alive, and we share that publicly, then we have salvation. And we can hope, we can know that salvation is true. I mean, it's a lot of stuff right there.
Yeah, no, it is, and I like kind of how we started off because it's that hope is knowledge, right? It's knowledge, and to have faith is knowing His Word and knowing that God never fails and that He's always been faithful and that He's any promise He's ever made, He's kept it. And the promises that He gives us in the Bible, right? That He loves us, that He cares for us, that He's going to take care of us, that we'll one day we'll be standing in glory with Him if we know Him and we believe in Him. Like that's my ultimate hope, is that at the end of all this, I'm going to be with Christ and Christ crucified and in His glory. And so, but just to have that faith and parents, that your faith is not transferable to your kids. We talked about it last episode, but that your faith lived out will plant those seeds and that you'll nurture those seeds. So it's so important that we understand our faith and what we stand for and what we believe in, and that we're constantly digging into His Word, and that we know where we stand and that we're on that solid rock, that solid foundation of His Word.
One of the great things about His Word is that it's so clear sometimes about certain things, and it's really clear about faith, I believe. Mm-hmm. And there's all sorts of examples of people who had faith. There's the Hall of Faith there in Acts. There's just and we were talking before we started recording that Abraham and Isaac come to our mind, right? So that's in Genesis chapter 22. I think it's verses 1 through 19. Yeah. And I won't read them all, but I'll read just a couple. It says in verse 1, "After these things God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham, here I am,' he answered. 'Take your son,' he said, 'your only son Isaac, whom you love, go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about.'" And this is a story here in these 19 verses that I've always struggled with, because how could a God ask a man to sacrifice his only son? He'd spent 100 years waiting on this son. Yeah. The Lord, and I believe it was Jesus who Abraham had a relationship with, promised him that he and his wife Sarah would have a child, and they were already well beyond childbearing years. And he had that hope and believed in that hope. He stepped away from that hope and kind of took matters in his own hands, which didn't work very well with Ishmael.
It doesn't work at all well for us, does it?
He had to learn the hard way too. And then finally the Lord, we talked about how He always comes through with His promise, came through with His promise. And then all of a sudden we read verses 1 that He wants him to take him to this mountain and sacrifice him.
Yeah. And as I look at this, and I've always loved this story, and it might just be the father in me, right? Like I imagine me having to take, I have daughters, so I imagine it's my daughter, right? Or a son, if like being called to take them and to sacrifice them, to give them, and just what faith it took for Abraham to say, "Come on, let's go. I'm gonna be obedient. I'm gonna be obedient in this." And just, but also, I look at this, and Abraham knew God. He knew God. He had a relationship with God. He knew His character. He knew what He stood for, and just that Abraham had faith that he was going to be delivered, and that if not, that God could raise him from the dead if need be, but that His will be done. But just how I even wrap my head around that is super difficult. And just I put myself in his shoes, and I think oftentimes, like, Charles, would you have that kind of faith to go and to move? The answer is no. Whenever I start thinking about it too much, I want it to be yes, but if I'm being honest, I look at this story and I think, what faith?
Right. Yeah, it says right there, it says, "So Abraham got up early in the morning and he made preparations. He saddled his donkey. He picked out 2 of his young men to go with him. He got Isaac. He split the wood for the burnt offering." He's
getting it ready.
And he went.
Yeah.
And he went. And that's really that's really faith, right? Because God had promised him that his seed, his lineage, would be like the sands of the sea. Mm-hmm. So how in the world would God actually come through with this promise if he were to actually allow Isaac to be killed, or if he couldn't raise him from the dead? I mean, I know many pastor friends of mine believe exactly what you just said. Abraham, in his mind, just knew that even if he did sacrifice, God would bring him back.
Well, in some of the language here, and it says in verse 5, and Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey and lad, and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you." And he took it, like the statement of like, we're coming back.
We. He didn't say I.
He didn't say I. He said we are. So just that Abraham had this confidence. And what confidence in your faith to know, hey, I know God, I know his character, I know who he is, I walk with him daily, I talk with him daily, that I'm going to step out in this obedience because I know he loves me.
Right.
And I know he cares for me. And I know his promises. He's promised something as well. And then you see how the story goes, right? It's an amazing story of God's deliverance, Abraham's faithfulness, and
And Paul's definition of faith can be a little challenging, or at least it is for me mentally, right? So when I try to listen to what we read in Hebrews 11 and look at Abraham's act of faith here, an acronym comes to my mind that I've used many times in student ministry to define what faith is. So faith, the F for, forsaking all, that's the A part. And all means everything, myself mostly. I, that's me, right? Trust, the T, only him with a capital H.
Yeah.
So forsaking all, I trust him. That's really the definition of faith. And we're seeing it lived out right here because Abraham was willing to forsake everything.
Yeah, and you see,
trust.
And you mentioned so Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." As Abraham and Isaac went up the mountain, they didn't see the lamb caught in the thicket.
No, they didn't know it would be there, did
they? They didn't know it'd be there, right? Like that faith is, they're going up and they're hoping the evidence of the things not seen, right? Like the ram was not caught in the thicket. That wasn't there, but they moved in faith, knowing that the Lord would deliver. He even laid his son on top of the altar.
He built the altar and then he bound him and put him right on top of the...
He was, ready. Even raised the knife up, and then, what verse is it? Sorry, I'm not there right now, but the angel calls out to him, doesn't he?
Verse 11.
Yeah, verse 11. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, and actually in 10 it says, Abraham stretched out his hand, took the knife to slay his son. So he's got it out, he's ready. And the angel called from heaven saying, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, here I am. I bet it was here I am. And he said to him, do not lay a hand on your lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. It just gives me chills, right? Like, it's just, he provides. And Abraham said, hey, if this is what I have to do. And God steps in and says, I got you.
I had a senior web developer that reported to me over a decade ago. His first name's Greg, and Greg's Marine. Pretty serious guy, right? Much like you, in this case of don't let grass grow under his feet. If he's got a task, I loved him having it on the team because he's on the spot. He's doing it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
We made a decision. He struggled with some decisions, but when we made a decision, buddy, he got it done. And I remember shortly after he was hired, Amy and I took him out to dinner in Asheville. They lived up on a mountain in Marion, drove down to Hickory to come to work every day. And he was very well versed in the Bible, but not a believer. And one of the questions that he asked me was, the story about Abraham and Isaac. He took me to the scriptures that you just read. And he goes, why would a loving God expect a man to murder his son? That was his question. And I said, Greg, you're missing the whole point of the story. God never intended Abraham to murder Isaac. God had already promised Abraham that his descendants would be huge, massive, and that the world would be blessed through his line. He's talking about that he was going to step into the world himself and live a perfect life and pay the debt, the sin debt that we have. He was telling Abraham that at the very beginning. So he wanted to make sure, because Abraham, maybe Abraham was struggling like I'm struggling. When my head gets real big, I like being the man. At work, I'm the man.
Yeah.
There's one person ahead of me, and he's the one that owns the place, right? And I'm like, yeah. And God has to constantly draw me back from that and say, no, Mark, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about me. You work hard, but that money's not yours. It's mine. You're a steward of this. So God was actually doing two things, I think. One, he was showing Abraham what he would have to do in order to pay the sin debt. He's going to give up his only son. And so Abraham, it was accredited to him for faith. He got up and went. God said, you need to get up and go and leave your family. He got up and went. God told him to take his son to the mountain, and he got up the next morning and packed the stuff and made preparations and went. And God was showing him what he would have to do. So this is a precursor of what God's going to do later on in the New Testament through stepping into his own creation and being a baby and growing up and living that perfect life to be that very last sacrifice, so that Abraham and others wouldn't have to do that, because we can't do it on our own.
No.
Because if he wouldn't do that, then we'd just be lost forever.
Yeah. No, I love it. And, we can talk about the different stories of faith, and this is one of many, right? We talked about many that we could have mentioned today. So let's turn it back around. Like, we're not being asked to take our son up to an altar and to sacrifice, right? We're not. But what does it look like for parents to live out their faith today, for their kids, to teach them, to show them, to model? We've talked about all those phrases, right? But what does that look like today, and how can we encourage parents in that today?
So I go back to my acronym, right? Forsaking all, I trust him. How do you live that out?
Yeah.
It's a great question. And you can do it many ways. And I think we have to do it on many fronts. Finances, for example. We should tithe. That first tenth, right? We should give it to our local church, because in order to have ministry, in order to have the spoken word, in order to reach the community, it takes funds. And it's not my funds.
Yeah,
the Lord's blessed me greatly in this area, but it's not mine. I've worked hard, and I like to think it's mine. And if I'm honest, if I'm trying to hand you $100 bill, I'd squeeze it a little bit because it comes hard, right? But it's really His. And even when it doesn't feel like I can, and He's telling me to do something, I should do that with my finances. I think that's one way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about just anything we're pursuing, right? We're pursuing it with God at the forefront. We can all become prideful. We can all become our little the rulers and kings of our lives. But are we saying, God, like, it's all yours? My family's yours. My home is yours. Right. Everything that I own is yours, and I should treat it as such. If there's someone in need, you call them. Can I take care of that need? Have you given me plenty? I think often, He's given us our daily bread. He's given us what we need for this moment, but how much more do we have, and how can we bless others, and what does that look like? And just how in Jesus' ministry He models that.
Right.
He goes and takes care of people, and He does all the healing, but He has a heart for others. And do we have a heart for others as Jesus would? So I love the faith acronym that you gave, and just trusting in Him. Forsaking all. What does the I stand for? Forsaking all.
That's us, right?
I trust Him. Forsaking all, I trust Him.
Absolutely.
So what are those things in our lives that we're hanging on to? And I call it white knuckling. What are the things we're hanging on to that they're ours, I'm keeping them, they're mine, that we might just need to let go and allow God to move and use? Right. And that's kind of a litmus test in my life. I got to constantly try to reevaluate. Sometimes my kids help me. You mentioned that earlier. Our kids can bring us back in, and maybe it was last episode, but how our kids can sometimes say, hey, Daddy, you're putting a lot of time into this. What about us, right? Like, they're great at that. My middle child, she's the best. It's often I got to remind myself, Charles, what are you holding on so tightly to that you need to let go of it?
And for me, a lot of times it's finances, right?
Yeah.
But also it's my children. And it's not really Ashley and Erica themselves. It's my desires for them. I want them to have a better life than I. If they want to play softball or volleyball or whatever sport, I want to make that happen for them. They love horses.
Yeah.
They could have picked any other sport. I'm telling you. Equestrian. I mean, 200 years ago, only rich people had cars. Well, today only rich people have horses because they just eat your money. It's terrible. But we want to do that for our kids, right? Or at least I do.
Yep.
And really, is it about my desires for my children? That's what I'm white knuckling sometimes. It's really ought to be, what is his desire for those two precious young ladies? What is he calling them to do? What is he equipping me to do for them now so that they can come to a better and deeper faith that they own with Jesus? We talked about how I can't give them my faith, but I can equip them and I can prepare the soil for their growth. Am I doing that, or am I spending money on horses and spending money to have horses' feet, taken care of and feed and things of that nature? Is that getting in the way of them participating in church activities?
Yeah, and as I think about this, and maybe as we wrap up, I'll give a final thought and kick it back to you. But just in order for our kids to see our faith and know our faith, they can see it sometimes, but I think also having real conversations with them. Whenever things are hard, or I think often I don't ask my kids to pray for us enough, even, or tell them what we're praying about as a family. So I think having those conversations and dialogue with your children of, hey, like, this is what we're going through. Doesn't mean you got to give them all the nitty gritty, but hey, like, listen, this has been hard lately, or this is something that we're doing because we know we're called to do it. You talk about tithe, right? Hey, listen, hasn't been the best month, but we're still going to give the first 10th, and this is why we do that. And but to have those real honest conversations with our kids, so that whenever they get out in the world, they're like, hey, this has been instilled in me. This is what Mom and Dad did. They didn't do it because of them. They did it because that's what God's called us to. So having those conversations, that's kind of a challenge. That what does it look like? What's too much? What's too little? And that's a conversation that you'll have to have with your spouse and kind of walk through that. But if we don't talk about it, how will they ever know? There's so many kids that I see just in the education world that come out and they're like, I don't know how to do finances. Well, why don't you? Well, Mom and Dad never talked about finances. Well, they failed, right? Like, I mean, they have. I'll be honest with you, because somebody's going to teach them about finances, and they're not just going to figure it out. Don't let the algorithm teach them about the finances, because they won't figure that out in a healthy way. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Final thoughts on the faith topic? What is faith, and all the things?
Well, we've unpacked a lot of things here today, Charles. We defined faith. Faith is a hope, but it's not a man's hope. It's a knowledge. It's a hope in God, right? It's actually an action, not an inaction. And faith means that we forsake everything. We forsake all, and us personally, I personally trust only Him. So in closing, I would just challenge our viewers and our listeners on how are you living out your faith, because that's really important. If we expect our children to develop their own faith, then we have to tell them what faith is, and then we have to model that faith in everything we do, in our finances, at work, in our family homes, at church, our relationships with our husband and our wives, our relationships with our friends and our neighbors. And what are they seeing? And are they seeing faith modeled out? Or are they really seeing an individual who is all about their family and all about himself or herself and all about the children and not really about others? And it's always about others. Into Matthew, Jesus gave us a command. He said, go. Go and do what? Go and share the gospel so that heaven can be can be made a welcome place for others.
Well, good stuff. I hope you've taken something from this. Go back and listen to the other episodes if you haven't got to catch those. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to recording another episode soon. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Charles.